Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yeah, baby, live around the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to it, the Tuesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show. Just another day in paradise, man. So nice, so nice. This 25, 26, 27 degrees here in the South Central area anyway. So much nicer than what it's actually 30. It's actually 33 degrees at my house right now. Anyway, it's just beautiful, man. It's beautiful. We love it. You ready to go? Let's figure out what kind of fresh hell that Brad Keithley from Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets is about to subject us to. I mean, we say that with the most loving, kind, Christian-like way we can, but it's always tough. It's always tough to get that dose of truth. So let's jump into it here and get started this morning. No Chris Story today. He sent me a text last night while I was asleep because that's the kind of guy he is. But he's going to be back later this week, and we'll figure something out. But let's jump over to Brad Keithley and just get started. I don't want to miss. There he is, the taskmaster. He's got the whip. He's got the chains. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Michael. How about Tuesday Truth? How about Truth Tuesdays?
You know, the truth hurts, right? That's all I can think of is the truth hurts, baby. No, you're right. We give Brad a hard time, but he is laying down some truth bombs, and sometimes that stuff's on target, man. Sometimes that stuff is on target. All right, well, let's get started this morning with the discussion of Brad. We're going to start off with the good start in Ways and Means, but it needs more. That's cryptic. So tell me more, Brad. What's going on this morning?
Well, last Wednesday, Ben Carpenter's Ways and Means Committee held a hearing for Alexi Painter, the Legislative Finance Director, to present the model, the legislative model, LFD model, Legislative Finance Division model, and give it, present it to Ways and Means so Ways and Means can start playing with it. It's a great model as far as it goes. The model, for those of you who haven't seen it, you can go to the hearing record on Ben's hearing on Wednesday and see at least the print-offs of what the model looks like. It has various knobs that enables you to reduce spending or increase revenues in a variety of ways. Frankly, a surprisingly broad number of ways that I think is a really good starting point for a discussion, continuing the discussion, renewing the discussion, however you want to put it, of ways to put a balanced, comprehensive package together to go forward on a fiscal plan. There are two things that it doesn't have, and they're not Alexi's fault. One of them may be Legislative Finance Division's fault, but there are two things it doesn't have. One is it doesn't have any modules for oil revenues. It doesn't have any modules to show changes in oil price as the futures market works forward. But more importantly, it doesn't have any modules to show changes in oil taxes, such as reducing the per barrel credit or closing the Hillcorp $100 million loophole, or doing other things that would bring the oil piece of the fix into the model. The reason it doesn't is because legislative finance has historically deferred to the Department of Revenue to provide those numbers. Department of Revenue has the tax numbers. Individual tax returns are confidential in this state. Producer tax returns are confidential in this state. And so revenue can take those and do aggregations that legislative finance cannot. Revenue's also got the model, the revenue model, the oil model that shows the different revenues at different oil prices. And revenue's also got the model that would show the effect of closing, of reducing the per barrel credit or closing the Hillcorp loophole or a variety of other things, that changing the amortization period.
Right, but they didn't put any of that. They have all these tools, but they didn't include any of those in the model that you're talking about.
Well, revenue has those tools, but legislative finance doesn't. So
Right.
legislative finance's model went as far as it could in terms of looking at various revenue measures, broad-based revenue measures, but didn't have anything on oil. And as we've talked about on the show before, revenue hasn't updated its data on the various pieces or the various components that would result from changing oil taxes. Revenue hasn't updated theirs since before Adam Crum became commissioner. All of a sudden, all that stuff disappeared from their revenue model, and they haven't put it back out there since. So, it's sort of like Ways and Means gets one strong hand out of the legislative finance division revenue model, but still has one hand tied behind its back in dealing with oil prices. Now, maybe Ben has in mind calling revenue up, the Department of Revenue up. If he doesn't have that in mind, I would encourage him calling the Department of Revenue up to talk about those things, to have a presentation of its oil model, to sort of update what had happened under Lucinda Mahoney's tenure, and bring that into the room so we can see the oil revenue piece, and that would be very useful. But that's not in the legislative finance division model, and that's a problem.
Well, and part of the problem. Oh, I'm just going to say before you jump into it, part of the reason why you're harping, I think, on this is because, again, that was part of the fiscal policy working group's model plan, was that new oil revenues would have to be generated, that there is money left on the table. You and I have talked about that although some people say that we don't. We've talked about that several times, that there's $400 or $500 million sitting on the table that could be utilized without affecting oil investment and exploration investments in the future. It's there. We just need to find a way to make it all work together synergistically with everything else.
Yeah, we talked about it repeatedly, Michael. There's about $400 million potentially in the in reducing the tax credits, the oil per barrel tax credits, and there's $100 million in the Hillcorp loophole, not chicken feed, either one of them. And
right.
Those would go to reducing the burden of other revenue sources to balance the budget. So they're critical.
Right. I just wanted to point that out, because we're talking specifically about getting some more revenue from the oil companies in that regard, because it's all a balanced approach. It's everything. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Number
exactly
two.
Exactly right. But legislative finance didn't present any of that because it doesn't have the numbers. The Department of Revenue has the numbers. The second thing that legislative finance could do, I think they have the tools to do it. If not, I'd be happy to give them mine. But the second thing that legislative finance didn't do was a distributional analysis. The impact of various revenue measures by income bracket. I don't know how you evaluate a revenue measure if you don't know its impact by income bracket, if you don't know its impact on Alaska families and through them on the overall Alaska economy. You're shooting in the dark if you don't have that information, particularly at a time when legislators say, "Oh, look, we've got a declining population, working Alaska families, and we've shown on this show that decline in population is going on in middle and lower income Alaska families. We got a decline in working Alaska families. That's a problem. We need to be sensitive to that. We need to try to close that." I don't know how you do a revenue measure if you don't have an analysis that shows what the impact would be on those very families that you claim to be concerned about. And so, a revenue measures that like Alexi presented, like Legislative Finance Division presented, that shows you the gross revenue numbers are fine as far as they go, but they're not, to me, they're not helpful in the sense that I don't know if I toggle, module A or toggle module B, I don't know what I'm doing to the impact on Alaska families. I don't know where that money's coming from. I don't know who's paying the money, and I don't know who's getting hit by the money. And I don't know the impact on the overall Alaska economy, because the impact on the overall Alaska economy is coming through Alaska families. So it's critical when you do any revenue measures, when you consider any revenue measures, it's critical to understand where that money's coming from. I mean, broad-based measures would take a part of it from non-residents, and that would be helpful because it reduces by shifting a part of it to non-residents. You reduce the burden on residents. Alaska families would pay 10% less if we used a broad-based revenue measure to raise the same revenue that we're doing through PFD cuts, because a broad-based revenue measure would raise 10% of it from non-residents. So it's critical to understand the distributional effects of these revenue measures. And Legislative Finance Division, I think, has the tools to do that and should be asked to incorporate those tools in the model, so that at the same time you're seeing the revenues you raise with various measures, you're seeing the impact on Alaska families from those measures.
Again, asking the question, who pays, right? I mean, that's really when it comes down to it, who's deeply affected by that. Okay, last 2 minutes of the segment. Summate this before we jump into number 2. What, final thoughts on this analysis at Ways and Means?
Well, great step forward. Really a lot of information, useful information that I'll incorporate in both shows here, both the discussion here, as well as in the weekly column. Gives me information that and gives Alaskans information that we haven't had about the impact of various revenue measures. But we need 2 more things. One, we need Department of Revenue to come forward with respect to the impact of various steps on oil revenues. The similar sort of presentation in terms of toggles. If you do this, you get this much revenue. And we need a Legislative Finance Division or someone. ITEP could do it if Legislative Finance can't. Someone to do the impact, the distributional impact, the impact by Alaska family brackets.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. Brad, give us a quick tease on number 2 before we jump away.
Number 2 is the Cook Inlet has started to dominate the conversation down in Juneau, and I don't have confidence that the legislature understands what they're talking about, or what they may understand what they're talking about, but I don't think they understand the issue, and I'm concerned that they're going to drive toward a solution that makes matters worse as opposed to making matters better.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. We're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Don't forget, you can always join us over on Facebook at facebook.com/Michael Duke Show. If you'd like to participate in the discussion with us during the commercial breaks, that's the best place to go and check it out. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll return right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. I will just tell the chat room real quick that I did. There it is, right there. I found it. See, look at that. That's the shirt that's available for anyone who wants one right there. We can make that work. I was looking for it yesterday because we talked about it last week or earlier this week or whatever. Brad, you're traveling.
I am. This is concert week. I saw a group called Nickel Creek, which is a great Americana group, last night in Peoria, Illinois, of all places. They played in Peoria. And then I go tonight up to Chicago to see Sarah Jarosz, another great Americana performer. So yeah, this is the concert tour.
Nice. Well, good. Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to come on board and share with us. I mean, I think it's a good start, Brad. I mean, with Ways and Means, of course, Ben Carpenter has been working diligently for the last 3 years. We talked to him on Monday, had him on the program for an hour on Monday, talking to him about all these bits and pieces. And I mean, the good news is it looks like HJR 7 might actually get a chance to get a vote. We'll see if that helps. But these are all bits and pieces, and we've talked about all this, whether it's new revenue from oil, cutting back on the size and scope of government, putting a spending cap in. I mean, all those things are useful, and we've all agreed, we being collectively the representatives of us all at the Fiscal Policy Working Group, all agreed that these are things that need to be done. But boy, we've just got to find the political backbone in the legislature to be able to put all these things together, because it just seems like they're all working at loggerheads right now.
Well, part of that, Michael, I think, is information. I think we Alaska citizens and the legislators, in fact, need more information to be able to make these decisions. They don't want the information. Maybe part of the problem is they don't want the information. Certainly, Department of Revenue doesn't want them to have information on oil. But I think if we had, I publish it virtually every week. I publish the distributional analysis of these things virtually every week. But people are dismissive sometimes of that because they say, oh, that's just one person's opinion. Well, if legislative finance did it, or if ITEP did it and presented it to the committee, I think that would have a lot of power. And then you would see, as you and I do, and as the listeners do, and as the readers of the landmine column do virtually every week, you would see that the adverse distributional impact, the loaded adverse distributional impact of the fiscal measures we're using, of PFD cuts and the things that we're using right now. You would see, just like the chart we used last week that showed House Finance benefiting from PFD cuts, everybody else losing from PFD cuts. House Finance benefiting from, or House Finance paying more with a flat tax, everybody else paying less with a flat tax. And by everybody else, I mean the other 80% of Alaska families. Just if Alaskans would see that information, I think there'd be a bigger impact on them and a bigger drive toward to get to a comprehensive fiscal solution. But they have to see the information, and for them to see the information, the information has to be generated. And the best place to generate it is in legislative committees, and I think Ben has a great opportunity. He's used that to develop revenues that legislative finance talked about last week. He's used it for that purpose. Now he needs to use his committee voice, I think. Use his committee to get revenue out, talking about oil taxes, the impact of oil taxes, and to get somebody, legislative finance or ITEP, talking about the distributional impact of these things.
Charlie asks, where can we find the slides and the tools that you're describing?
Okay, so you can either just write Ben, probably the easiest way, or you can go to Wednesday. You can go to the legislature's website, go to the last Wednesday's hearing by House Ways and Means, and look under documents, and you'll find find it there.
All right, here we go. Jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Let's get it done. Here we go. Please like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. Only 16 of you have liked me so far. I need you to like me.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're doing what we like to call the weekly top three, which is some of us call it the weekly beating. Others call it the informational download that we needed for this week. Anyway, Brad continues on to number two. Brad, hit us with it here. Let's jump right in.
All right, so we got to do some oil and gas basics here to talk about the Cook Inlet, and I don't think the legislature really comprehends a couple of basics, or if they do, they're just overlooking them. One basic is there are two components of gas that you're concerned about. One is reserves, and that's how big a tank you've got. And the other is deliverability, and that's how much out of the tank you can take at any given point in time. And what we really should be focusing on in Alaska is a deliverability issue, getting gas out of the tank. How fast can we get gas out of the tank? If you can pop that chart up that I sent you earlier today, if you got it.
Yep, I got it. Here it comes. There you go.
All right. So last Thursday, there was a hearing before the Joint Resources Committee, House Resources Committee, and Senate Resources Committee to focus on the Cook Inlet issue. A lot of arm waving, a lot of, oh my God, the sky is falling stuff. And really a big concern about what's going on here. And this chart was used by Hillcorp to help educate on the discussion. This chart shows the Hillcorp gas contracts by volume and by year in the green blocks. They show the Hillcorp deliverability out under those contracts or out of its reserves across by that green line across the top. The dotted line across the bottom shows what the deliverability would be if Hillcorp didn't do any drilling. What Hillcorp was trying to emphasize with this chart was they are doing drilling, and that's moving the curve from the deliverability curve from the dotted line up to the solid line. The gray, whenever you see an overlap with gray, the gray is where Hillcorp isn't delivering enough to meet the demand. I'm sorry, the green line. The green line, the solid green line is, Hillcorp's development plan. So they're showing, and the demand is the Cook Inlet demand is sort of the gray up there. They're showing the shortfall of Hillcorp's contracts against total demand. And what that's really showing is we've got a deliverability problem, that Hillcorp doesn't have enough deliverability out of its reserves. It's not really a long-term reserve problem. It's really a deliverability problem. What Enstar said last week during their presentation is LNG, they don't expect LNG to be able to come on until 2030. And so there's really what we really should be focusing on is the gap in deliverability, the inability to deliver all the reserves, all the supplies that the Cook Inlet needs until the LNG gets on. Because LNG is going to be expensive, but as we've talked before on the show, it's the market solution. It's what is the cheapest solution in terms of cost out there. So what the legislature really should be focusing on is how do we get deliverability up until the LNG supplies can get on. And that's not, giving royalty relief for new wells, giving tax relief for new wells, maybe subsidizing new wells. That's really a long-term reserve issue. What you're trying to deal with there is a long-term reserve issue as opposed to a deliverability issue. So it's important, I think, for the legislature to focus in on on the issue that the Cook Inlet's really facing, which is deliverability. Now, part of the deliverability issue can be solved by drilling additional wells. Enstar testified part of the deliverability issue can be solved by drilling additional wells in their storage unit. Their storage unit only has 5 wells now, I think, 5 production wells. 2 of those had problems during the latest peak. And so you've got, you're down 40% with those 2 wells down. If you had more wells in the storage field, you've got deliverability up, and you can deliver more of your gas on peak. You can pour more out of your tank on peak than Enstar was able to during this last cold snap. There are other ways to deal with deliverability. I mean, Hillcorp may be able to drill some near-term wells that would increase deliverability, but things that they were talking about in terms of subsidizing new drilling by either by Bluecrest down at Cosmopolitan, or John Hendricks's company up at North Fork, or Kitchen Lights, they're trying to deal with a reserve problem. Now, some would say, well, we've got a reserve problem too, because long-term we want to continue to survive on Cook Inlet gas. Well, but no one's demonstrated that's a better market opportunity for the state overall, for citizens overall than LNG, putting LNG in place. And then we've got some people who say, oh, we just need to subsidize the big gas line coming down from the top. Right. And that'll solve the problem. But again, that's a more expensive solution.
Right, because from a financial aspect, the only thing that makes sense right now in the long term is LNG, because nobody else, the import of LNG from an offshore, from an offshore source somewhere.
Right, and it's not an either or. We're not talking about either Cook Inlet supplies or LNG supplies. Cook Inlet supplies will continue to be there, and people can continue to develop Cook Inlet supplies if the price is right. But developing Cook Inlet supplies at a huge cost, as people are talking about with taking away royalty and that sort of stuff, developing Cook Inlet supplies at a huge cost doesn't make much sense when you compare it to LNG. 2 things about the hearing last week that I thought, 3 things about the hearing last week that I thought were telling. 1, we've got a regulator that's supposed to be looking out for all this. The Regulatory Commission of Alaska has a responsibility of supervising the utilities and making sure the utilities are able to live up to their obligations. If Enstar is saying that they're going to go short, it ought to be the RCA that's all over them, and the RCA ought to be hearing proposals for how to deal with that shortfall, and moving forward on proposals for dealing with that shortfall. They weren't at the hearing at all, and I think that's somebody doesn't want to hear from the regulator that has the responsibility for dealing with this issue. Maybe the regulator doesn't want to talk, but I'm going to guess that somebody didn't want to hear from the regulator. The second thing that was telling was they didn't have any economists. There's been an economics group that's been hired to look at the Cook Inlet, look at the economics of the various options, and bring forward what seems to be the best economic opportunities. In a hearing before the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, in a hearing before the RCA. They didn't have anybody from that group show up at the hearing or invited to testify at the hearing to talk about what the various options are and what the economics are. It was like, we're dead certain we're going in one direction. We don't want to hear about these opportunities or these alternatives. So that was the second most telling thing. We've got economists who have looked at what the most efficient, the best economic results are for the Cook Inlet, and they weren't asked to testify either. The third thing that was most telling was a comment that John Sims made. John Sims is the president of Enstar. John Sims made at one point. He was talking about tax cuts for the smaller producers, for Bluecrest at the Cosmopolitan field and for John Hendricks at the Kitchen Lights field. And Sims was quoted as saying, "We need to look at not what this is going to cost the state in terms of subsidies, but what it's going to save consumers." So what we're really talking about is a transfer of money from the state to South Central consumers to try to lower the cost of gas. That was the goal that Sims was talking about in that quote, and the goal that others talked about. How much money will it take for the state to give up to lower the cost of gas to South Central consumers to a level that they find acceptable? Well, that shouldn't be the goal, particularly in the financial condition the state's in. What should be the goal is finding what's the lowest cost overall for the state, not how much we can lower the cost to consumers by taking money out of the state, but what's the best result for the state overall? What's the lowest impact for the state overall in terms of finding alternatives? That's what the economists that have been working on this and have been testifying to the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. That's what they've been working on, to find the lowest cost overall. And I think it's telling both that A, they weren't there at the hearing, they weren't called to testify at the hearing, and B, Sims let the cat out of the bag when he said what we're really talking about is how much can we get the state to give us to keep prices low for consumers in South Central? How much can we increase the deficit, if you will, the Alaska deficit, if you will, by running money over to South Central consumers to keep the price low for them? It's sort of like Venezuela in a way. I mean, Venezuela subsidizes gasoline prices to keep the cost of gasoline low for consumers. They do it by running huge deficits in the government. This is sort of the Alaska version of the same thing. How much money does it take? How much money do we need to give from the state to keep prices low, to keep natural gas prices low for consumers in the Cook Inlet?
Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. We're talking about the weekly top three. Brad, obviously having economists there to make sense. I mean, some other options should have been on the table. It seems like the die is cast on this, so that they're going in a certain direction. What would your suggestions be here in the last couple minutes?
Well, let the RCA handle it. I mean, in the first place, you've got a statute that sets up a regulatory commission that's supposed to have responsibility for this. It ought to be the RCA that's coming to the legislature to tell the legislature what the RCA, having taken into account all the issues, having taken into account all the information, having taken into account what the economists say, it ought to be the RCA that's coming to the legislature to testify about what they think the right approach is, and if they need additional legislative authority, what that legislative authority ought to be. That's sort of issue number one. Issue number two is there's the economists ought to be there. What this hearing basically was, oh my God, the producers are telling us they need help. How do we use this crisis to give the producers help? How do we give them more money in order to help them out? And as John Sims said, how do we give them more money so consumers in South Central Alaska get lower prices, so that Alaska can be like Venezuela in that regard? I mean, that's what the hearing was about. It was focused on producers needs and getting the price down to South Central consumers. It ought to be focused on getting the lowest overall economic solution for Alaska overall.
In the long term, obviously LNG it seems to be the direction that they're headed. Is there any way that you see a feasibility of Alaskans gas filling that niche in the short, mid, or long term?
Here's what an economist would tell you. LNG is going to send a price signal. Bringing LNG in is going to send a price signal. The price signal is going to be the price needs to be higher in order to satisfy gas. What I'm going to be interested in is what the Cook Inlet producer's response is to that price signal. If I were a Cook Inlet producer, I'd say, well, I can't produce gas at $5, which is what I've been selling it to you for, or $4, what I've been selling it to you for. I can no longer, justify developing gas supplies at that price range. But if LNG is going to be $10, then maybe I can justify developing additional gas supplies at $9, undercut LNG and still make a profit for myself. We need that free market price signal in there that to go to Cook Inlet producers, and Cook Inlet producers say, okay, well, I've got a response to this now. I can develop additional supplies at this price. What Enstar and what the legislature is trying to do is they're trying to cut that price signal and say, oh no, we don't care what the price signal is going to be. We want to keep it at $5. So how much in state subsidies can we pour in there to keep it at $5? And I think if we let the market work, LNG threatens to come in. LNG perhaps comes in for a short period of time. I think the Cook Inlet producers see a whole different price signal and see a whole different set of economics about developing additional supplies. And that's the market working. What Sims and others are trying to do is stop the market from working by saying, we're going to come in with state money, we're going to subsidize producers so they can subsidize South Central consumers. And so everybody will be happy. We need to let the market work. We need to let LNG, that price signal from LNG, come in, and let the Cook Inlet producers then respond to that price signal.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. We're going to jump into number 2 here in just a hot second. We're going to talk about borrowing. You and I talked about this earlier this week. Borrowing, not a good idea from my point of view. I think Brad probably agrees on that. Let's get his take on that in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with Brad Keithley from Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
And I think Brian actually encapsulates some of my thoughts on this because Brian, rather, not Brad, but Brian encapsulates some of my thoughts on this. And he says, no, not that one. He says right here, he says, and everyone gets a little cut of that scheme. You know what I mean? The state comes in, they do their subsidies, they do this, they build out the LNG, and then LNG becomes, but everybody's getting their taste on the way through of all that government lucre trying to make all these things happen instead of letting just the market work the way that it works. Everybody gets a taste on the way to whatever inevitable solution there is.
Yeah, it's legislators have we've talked about this before on the show. Legislators have hero complexes. There's a problem. Oh my God, there's a problem. I got to step in and do it. And for some legislators, I listen to producers. Producers say, I've got a solution. Just give me money or take away costs, which is the same thing. Costs that are money to you. Take away costs, and I'll provide the solution. I mean, we're as I said, this is the Alaska version of Venezuela. We're trying to figure out a way to subsidize somebody, so they'll subsidize somebody else, and legislators will look like the heroes because they're the ones that set up the subsidy. The problem is the state. Ultimately, it's permanent fund dividends to take the hit because somebody's got to make up the revenue that otherwise would have been there. Tom McKay said at one point, well, we're not giving away anything because there wouldn't otherwise be production. So it's okay if we're giving away royalty because there otherwise wouldn't be production. Well, there will be production. I mean, if LNG comes in, LNG is not the complete solution. There's going to be a need for additional Cook Inlet production. As I said, LNG is going to set a price signal that may bring additional production online, additional revenue online that the state would get a share of. So it's not what McKay says. It's not, we're not going to get anything anyway, so let's just give away the store. We are going to get something, and you are giving away the store in order to subsidize the producers, so they'll subsidize the Cook Inlet. Let the market work, and let the market send the price signal that it's supposed to do. Let Cook Inlet producers respond to that, and we'll just go forward. The state will make money. We won't have a Venezuela situation on our hands.
But Brad, we need to do something. Right? We have to do something. I mean, that's the push there. And for everybody talking about coal in the chat room, because I've seen a lot of people talking about coal. Yes, we have some of the cleanest burning coal on the planet. Yes, we've got 5 centuries worth of supply, et cetera, et cetera. But good luck getting a new coal plant built. It'd take you 20 years to get, if you could even get it done, because the federal government has stated they are basically trying to manipulate you into not using fossil fuels at all. That's the whole point. The gas is a step in that direction before they hit renewables. They are bound and determined in one way or the other to get you off of fossil fuels. So forget about coal in the in the short or medium term, because they just got no interest in doing that. The federal government's made it nearly impossible to use any kind of coal generation. I mean, they're shutting down the plant in Healy, which, I mean, I still don't understand the long-term effects of some of the things that are going to happen there. But it's kind of crazy, but there you go. And of course, nobody wants to talk about nuclear. So, what are we going to do?
Well, if you let the market work, maybe people would realize that clean coal would be a good option. If you let the market work, maybe people would realize that nuclear would be a good option. But by suppressing the market, which is what that hearing last week was focused on doing, by suppressing the market, by using government money to subsidize producers, so producers will subsidize consumers, you're intervening in the market. You're interfering with the market in a way that you're never going to get true price signals out. And you're never going to get true solutions out. You're always going to, once you start to subsidize, like Venezuela with gasoline, once you start those subsidies, people just won't want to go off of them. And we'll just keep going and going and going and going down this road. How much more do we need to give you to bribe you into producing the gas that's out there? No, let the market work. Let LNG, which is the near-term solution, let it come in, let it send a price signal, and let people respond to it. It will also send a price signal to the electrics. And the electrics may say, ooh, this renewable stuff, yeah, we need to get more of that because that's going to be cheaper than the cost of gas. Let the market work, and we'll get the price signals out there, and people will respond correctly to the price signals, as opposed to this Venezuela-like subsidy scheme that the legislature seems to be focused on. John Sims seems to be focused on.
Quick response here. Tom McKay is in the chat room, actually. He says, LNG will double, maybe even triple heating prices. Is that going to be okay for your house?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if that's what the market is, it's not really going to do that, Tom. I mean, if you'd let the economists come testify, they would tell you it's not really going to do that. I mean, that's what the producers are telling you. That's what they want you to think.
Right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. Borrowing is on our note here. Less than a third of you have liked the show this morning. I'm looking at you right now. Like it a lot. Let's get back to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
No. All right, let's get to it. Let's jump into the final segment here, number 3, talking about borrowing. I had a big it's a pet peeve of mine. I had a big thing about it yesterday, but let's get Brad's take on this. So they want to borrow. And what I heard from I got a text from somebody down in Juneau yesterday while we were talking about this, and they said that he's hearing on the word on the street is that everybody is talking about this general obligation bond because some Anchorage legislators want to use it to replace Mulcahy Stadium, amongst other things. But I mean, this is the whole point. They want a bond. Now they want a bond for government, borrow money for capital, all this other kind of stuff. Brad, give us your thoughts on this.
So the core of this is a $200 million grant that we're getting from the federal government to beef up rail belt electricity, the rail belt grid, to build additional transmission lines or to beef up the existing transmission lines we've gotten. It's a $206 million grant coming from the federal government for that purpose that the Alaska Energy Authority has gotten. And the question on the table is how do we the state has to pay a matching amount. How does the state come up with its matching amount for that $206 million grant? The Energy Authority has gone out and borrowed $20 million. So we got about $180 million left. The budget isn't in really good shape to have take another $180 million hit. Now, I've seen some comment that we can spread that over time, and maybe we can, and maybe that lessens the hit. But it's $180 million one way or the other. So the core of the discussion about the GO bond has been, let's use a geo bond to raise this other $180 million. And by using a geo bond, we'll pay it off. We'll pay it off over the course of the geo bond's life, as opposed to having to come up with all the money now or come up with all the money in a fairly limited number of years. At the core, that makes sense. I mean, the grant, we do have transmission problems in this state, electric transmission problems in this state. The grant is nice to get. Coming up with the other $200 million is probably the right thing to do to take advantage of the grant to deal with the electric transmission problems. And so at the core, you sort of begin to understand the sense around the geo bond. But the problem is that core quickly explodes. It quickly becomes a Christmas tree. I mean, the discussion already is, oh my God, well, if South Central is going to get, or if the rail belt's going to get something like this, then Southeast needs something like this, and the Bush needs something like this, and Southwest needs something, and it just goes on and on and on, and the Christmas tree starts exploding. There was an editorial. One sense of this, there was an editorial in the Fairbanks News Miner this week that I broke out laughing. The headline is, "It's time to reconsider the Susitna hydroelectric project." Oh yeah, let's bring that sucker back on the table, and talk about including that in the bond. And then some people will say, well, we're going to include Susitna, then we ought to talk about including costs for the Alaska gas line in the bond. And it just explodes into a million pieces. So to me, if that's the cost of pursuing of taking this route to get the $180 million necessary to match the $200 million coming from the feds, then that's not going to be worth it. We need to be looking at other options to get the $180 million. If it's constrained, if we can focus just on that $180 million, then using a geo bond to raise that money may make some sense. But if that $180 million suddenly becomes $500 million or $750 million or $1 billion, because everybody realizes we're not going to have a capital budget again for the next 20 years. And so, yeah, this is our one opportunity to get a big capital budget. And as a legislator, I can do it on my watch. If that's the solution, if that's what the $180 million costs, then it's not worth it. We need to be looking at other alternatives. But it was just fun to see, in a
morbid way. Morbid way. Yeah.
It was fun to see, this core concept. We need $180 million. What's the right way to raise it? And all of a sudden, for that to explode, everybody going, "Ooh, that's a good idea." Yeah, well, I got my project here. And to see that explode in just a very, very short period of time.
It again, this is always the problem. It's always a good idea to start with, but the next thing you know, your $180 million general obligation bond all of a sudden is $800 million because everybody's added every little thing to it. And even again, credit where credit's due. Even Bert Stedman said, "This is dangerous," kind of thing. So, I get worried about it when government is borrowing to pay for to pay for today's stuff, and we're going to borrow for 25 or 30 years on something like that. That does make me a little bit nervous. Now, infrastructure, obviously super important. Obviously to get our transmission lines all squared away and get everything else, I think that's important. But the question is, why aren't we eliminating other things that are nice to haves instead of must haves to come up with that $180 million? Why would we borrow it if we can look at things that the state's doing that it's not mandated to do by the Constitution to find that money? To me, that would make more sense than borrowing on it in a thing. But the second that we go forward, and Rob just said the legislature's famous for making economic decisions for political reasons, that's exactly what this becomes.
Yeah, and this is not the world's best time to be borrowing. We keep track of the cost of Treasury borrowings, U.S. Treasury borrowings, which is sort of the riskless cost of borrowing, the standard from which other borrowing is judged, is set. And we're still above 4% on 10, 20, and 30-year U.S. Treasury bonds. So, the state of Alaska would not be able to borrow at the same rate as the U.S. government. So our cost of borrowing would be higher than that. this is not a particularly great time to be out borrowing. This is one of the problems, frankly, with the permanent fund board's concept of going out to borrow money for additional investment. The cost of borrowing is so high, the margin between the cost of borrowing and the return on equity that you might get out of that borrowing is very narrow. And if a couple of projects go bad, you're in the tank. So it's not a great time to be borrowing. And as a result of that, you want to limit your borrow. If you've got to borrow, you want to limit your borrowing. This is not the time to blow up borrowing into big numbers and then have a big interest cost on top of it and then be paying that during the life of the borrowing. I mean, the Fed looks like it's going to take interest rates down, near-term interest rates down. That helps influence what long-term interest rates are. It'll start bringing long-term interest rates down. There may be a time when it's going to be better to borrow out there. So right now, if we need the stuff, there's going to be a better time to borrow out there. So right now, it's better to narrow the borrowing. I guess I would say though, that right time to borrow in terms of interest costs would not be during the term of the current legislature, and so the current legislators would not get credit for that better borrowing. So
right.
They're sort of indifferent to interest costs, I guess.
Again, making economic decisions for political reasons. One more time, they can't be seen as doing something, right? Kind of thing. All right, Brad. About a minute here. Final thoughts here for today.
Well, just to hit the three things, Ben's on the right track. That committee needs to call Department of Revenue and get them to testify on oil revenue numbers, the toggles on oil revenue numbers. They need to look at distributional analysis. Cook Inlet, we're focused on the wrong thing. We're focused on becoming how much like Venezuela can we become? We ought to be focusing on making economically efficient decisions and setting a price signal that Cook Inlet producers, a legitimate market price signal that Cook Inlet producers can respond to. And the third piece of it is we need to, if we're going to borrow, we need to keep it very compact, very narrow. If it becomes a Christmas tree, then we need to tank the whole thing and look at another way of raising the $180 million we need for the offset of the federal grant.
Ben Carpenter just popped into the chat. We got a lot of legislators in here today. Alaska needs to grow up. It starts with sustainable fiscal policy, taxing and spending that promotes economic growth. Incentives matter. We're incentivizing the wrong thing. Yeah, you think? I think that puts a point on it, doesn't it, Brad? That's pretty much it, right?
It does, and that sort of underlines all three things today. Yes, we're incentivizing the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. Brad Keithley, Alaskans For Sustainable Budgets. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you coming on board. We will see you next week.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. Hour 2 dead ahead. No Chris Story, but I got some other things to discuss. We'll continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Representative Tom McKay said earlier, I don't know if you saw this, Brad, he said, okay, we will invite Brad and the RCA to testify. To that, that'd be good. I think to that you should add economists. But yeah, if Tom McKay's willing to have you and the RCA in there to talk about this stuff, it's good to get the other side of the coin. I mean, you can't just have the producers in there giving you all the doom and gloom that matches their stuff. Having the RCA, having Brad, having economists in there, probably a good start, Brad.
Yeah, sure. Bring it on. I mean, well, it'll be an interesting discussion. You're absolutely right. The economists need to be there as part of it as well, because the economists have taken detailed looks at this and focused on what the right solution is. I mean, why hire consultants if you're not going to use them? I mean, it's sort of a silly thing, right? I mean, we need consultants. We need the consultants to dig into this. Okay, we got consultants now. They're dug into it. Now this is where it goes. Oh well, we don't want to hear from them. Right.
They may tell us something we don't want to hear, but we just hired him for the lulz. We just hired him for the giggles. Okay, we figured we had to check the box. Now we don't have to listen to him. We've hired him. We don't have to listen to him. So interesting stuff. There was something else. What was the Donna's comment? Borrowing from your children and grandchildren is even worse if it's for defined benefits for government employees. FYI, the Government Benefits Subcommittee at the House State Affairs Committee meets at 5 p.m. today. I mean, that's the other thing. We're going to borrow we're indebting ourselves even more, like eyes wide open. We're like plunging into the vat of acid, with eyes. Oh, this is going to be a great swim. Let's just jump in there with both. I just don't understand that at all. Absolutely. It's at all.
And we're going to use PFD cuts to finance it. We're going to take money out of the pockets of the very people, out of the very income brackets that we have problems with in Alaska, the working middle and lower income Alaska families. We're going to take more money out of them. I mean, the legislature doesn't understand what it's doing. And I understand why it doesn't understand what it's doing, but it's nonetheless not understanding what it's doing. It needs to do the distributional analysis of the revenues so that people can see who's actually paying for this stuff. It needs to, use the economists on the Cook Inlet so that people can actually see what the economics are of the alternatives and what we're talking about subsidizing here. The legislature needs to benefit from information, and Alaskans need to benefit from the information. I mean, the press doesn't report what the legislature doesn't bring up, and so the press is only reporting what the legislature does. So when the legislature narrows the focus, the press narrows the focus.
The press only the press only tells you what the legislature wants it to tell you. That there's no questions being asked. Please, sir, could I have another press release that I can paraphrase and send out as a news story? Sorry, that was mean of me, but that's kind of how I feel about what's going on. All right, final stop. Brad, you're going where? Chicago tonight? More music?
Going to Chicago to see Sarah Jarosz tonight. For Americana music fans, they'll readily know who Sarah Jarosz is. She's got a new album out. And then Wednesday night, I'm going to see there's a Broadway production in Chicago of "Girl from the North Country," which is a collection of Bob Dylan songs. So I'm gonna see that too. It's just sort of, I got on this roll this week of seeing music in theater. So I'm gonna run it through Wednesday and then go back and check in with my mother again.
Well, good. We'll give her our love and tell her we're glad to that she lets you out of the house every now and then. Can Brad come out to play, please, Miss Keithley? Can Brad come out to play?
Just tell her not to fall anymore. Mom listens to this. Don't fall anymore.
Oh, don't fall anymore. Oh, I know. Isn't that the worst? My mom and dad. My mom fell, and it was like, my dad. He had a stroke a few years ago, and so it's just been very difficult. I always dread that phone call, like, oh, somebody fell down again. So take your time. Take your time is what I'm saying. Take your time and go from obstacle to obstacle that you can brace yourself against. That's all I can say. So, all right, Brad. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. Next week, you got an inkling next week of what you're going to be digging into?
Oh, it may be the Cook Inlet more. I mean, if I get to go testify at the legislature, it may be a precursor of the testimony. But it'll be something about fiscal matters, and it'll be something about the Cook Inlet. This week's column is going to be on the Cook Inlet. So we'll see how that comes out.
We really haven't really dived into the whole thing on defined benefits. I think we talked about it in passing, but maybe we should do some analysis on that here in the future too. Maybe you can add that to next week's, your thoughts on that, and especially with comparatives to some of the other places around the country, because it's going away, and we're so backwards in so many ways. Let's jump back into what everybody else is getting out of, because it's got to be good, what we already got out of once, and now we're going to get back into again. Makes no sense.
It's one of the few times, maybe in the last 5 years, that I've agreed with Bert Stedman on something.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Stedman said that's not what's driving employee retention. And there's no guarantee that we're not going to get down in the hole again. So it's a useful thing to talk about. I'll add it to the list.
There you go. Brian says, it's ironic that kids learn to walk by furniture surfing and older people survive by furniture surfing. There you go, Brian. That's the comment of the day. All right, Brad. Well, thank you so much, my friend. We will talk with you next week. Thank you for being here. Have fun again.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for having me on. Look forward to next week.
You bet. Talk to you soon. All right, folks. Well, that brings us up to the next hour. Oof, man, so fast. This is so fast. We're going to get back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. We're almost to half of the chat rooms, all the different watching. Who's watching on where? I can see now. Yeah, we've got about 20 people watching on YouTube. And so anyway, everybody like it. Wherever you're at, like it.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to hour two of the big radio broadcast. We are ready to... We're ready to get into this for hour two. Now, normally on Tuesdays, Chris Story is going to be joins us and talks about, we get a little positivity. This week, we were supposed to get from Chris not only a positivity update, but we were supposed to get his take on this news story that came out of Anchorage about Mark Begich and company buying a parking lot for less than what the market would bear. He offered to give us some analysis as a realtor of that. But anyway, he sent me a text last night when I was asleep and said, sorry. He can't make it today. So maybe on Thursday we'll bring Chris Story on board and, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with that. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to be talking, of course, with Mike Shower. And then in hour two. In hour one, we're going to be talking with Harmony Tomaszewski, who's going to come on board. She has officially been nominated and is an official candidate for the GVEA board. And which, some people are like, well, that doesn't really matter. I just don't. I think it's important to see exactly where we're going. I've been involved in a couple different GVEA board discussions and disputes over the years with some of their candidates. So Harmony Tomaszewski is going to come on board tomorrow and talk with us a little bit that in hour one. All right. So welcome to it. Welcome to spring? ? It's actually gone up. I mean, I was saying earlier, it was 32 degrees, 33 degrees. Now it's 35 degrees here at the Radio Ranch. It's fast approaching. Somebody reported down the road for me 40 degrees, and it's 38 and raining down in the peninsula. I don't know what's going on in Fairbanks at this exact moment, but maybe spring has sprung a little early. I shouldn't have said that. I should not have said that. But here we are. We're getting ready to get into it. All right. So, what are we going to talk about in this hour? Well, first and foremost, I want to let you know that I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines. So if you want to sound off on anything, now's the time to do it. 907-433-3150. 907-433-3150. If you would like to sound off on any of the things we talked about this morning, I'd love to hear what you have to say, or any other topics this morning. It's great. 24 and rising in Fairbanks right now. I mean, it's such a tease. Oh, spring, you bitter, bitter woman. Shaking my fist at Mother Nature. Anyway, it's going to be a horrible tease, especially if the temperature drops on us again here in the future. All right, we are going to talk about a few things. We got a big a disaster problem out of Quillingock we could talk about. We're also going to talk about the fact that politicians gonna politician. And that's being discussed right now in Anchorage as one of the assembly members has put forward an ordinance that would change all the rules for the downtown intersections when nobody asked for it. When nobody asked for it. We're also going to talk about the mother of all data breaches that none of you have probably heard about. I have seen almost zero reporting on this, but I do want to throw that out there and talk about it. And also, although we normally don't talk about national stuff, I will say that there's some interesting things happening at the national level, and I'm going to talk about this simply because my friend JD Tuchili over at Reason Magazine has written about this. The title of his article, which is so good, is "Joe Biden's No Good, Very Bad Day. It was a week of bad news for the president. Fortunately for him, he probably won't remember." It's just, I mean, baby, you cannot make this stuff up. You cannot make up this stuff. This presidential race is shaping up to be just disastrous one way or the other. I'm shaking my head on that. And finally, we will also talk about Sarah Vance, who was forced to make an apology on the floor or on the House floor this week because of something she said about domestic violence and sexual assault rates and things like that, which, okay. I mean, I just, in my mind, I'm looking at this and I think this is so much to do about nothing. And it's been politicized now by the minority. And I got some thoughts on this, but we'll get into it. All right. So that's kind of what I want to talk about for this hour. But as I said earlier, the phone lines are open. So if you want to sound off and talk about anything else, you're welcome to. I mean, I just love, whatever you want to do. Let's jump into that and we'll see what you guys have to say. 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150. First and foremost, let's talk about this disaster that happened out at Quillingock. It was this last week, and apparently Quillingock is way out there on the western side of Alaska, small rural village in Southwest, and it looks like according to a DEC report, that as they were transferring diesel fuel from one storage tank to a smaller storage tank, apparently somebody went to sleep. I don't know what happened, but they dumped 6,467 gallons of diesel out onto the tundra. They were moving from a 10,000 gallon tank to a much smaller tank. And they discovered that it is, just wow, 6,400 gallons of diesel fuel. They said it was being moved from one storage tank to a smaller storage tank, both owned by Quick Inc., a general store in the area. The spill centered around the Quick Inc. marina. The DEC said it's believed that human error led to the fuel being spilled and that the leak wasn't discovered until employees returned on work Thursday morning. So this pump apparently was running for hours. And they said as soon as they discovered it, they shut off the pump. There was a transfer pump that was going on. The transfer pump moves about 20 gallons a minute. and it was just going nonstop. The report described the land around the site as frozen tundra in winter months with small ponds and sensitive wetlands surrounding it. It did not specify if any waterways outside the immediate vicinity would be affected, but said there was no discharge into the Quilingok River that drains into the Kuskokwim Bay. And they said the only animals that would be affected are stellars and speckled eider ducks, which are considered threatened, of course, and wood bison, but added that none of those animals would be expected to be living in the area at this time of the year. So, but somebody's got some splaining to do. And in fact, the fact that they're paying, I think Willie said earlier that they're paying $8 and change, almost $9 for a gallon of fuel right now. So just do the math on that. $9 a gallon times 6,400 gallons. Somebody's losing their job over that one. I'm just telling you that for nothing. Somebody is losing their job over that one. And the good news is, they recovered 85 gallons of fuel, right? That's what they said. 85 gallons of fuel out of these 6,400 gallons of fuel. Absolutely crazy stuff going on out there. But I don't know exactly what, I just don't know exactly what to say to that other than woof, somebody's having a bad day. Somebody out there is definitely having a bad day. What else here? Do we have time for anything? No, we're kind of running up against it. So I will remind you that if you would like to participate in the show more fully, you can do so by jumping over into the chat room. We broadcast the show every morning, not just on the radio, but we also simulcast the show on Facebook and Twitch and YouTube. So if you want to participate over there on any one of those, you can go over there and participate during the commercial breaks. We hang out and we talk behind the scenes during the commercial breaks. We also get a little bit of an after show usually for a few minutes, just kind of summating everything. So if you want to participate in a new way, you can go over there and hang out with us on Facebook or wherever. And finally, if you want to help support the show and you want to, be a kind of a mini sponsor, you could join the Cool Kids Club, which is called the Common Sense Corps. And for as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show, get access to our private Facebook page for core members, and so much more. It's all over at michaeldukeshow.com, or you can go to patreon.com/michaeldukeshow to get access to that and to be part of it together. So that's all the good stuff. That's all the housekeeping, which takes us to the commercial break. Again, phone lines are open, my friends. We are ready to take your calls if you want to sound off. 907-433-3150. 907-433-3150. We will continue with more here in just a minute. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Yeah. What do we got here? Going off down here. Light it off, not literally. Okay. Is this a private Facebook page, or if you're a member of the Common Sense Corps, it's a private Facebook page. It's a private Facebook group. If you become a member of the Common Sense Corps, you get to see all the stuff we're talking about behind the scenes. We're all talking about you behind your back. Not really, but there's always some interesting stuff in there. And I love I love chatting and hanging out. I think I need to do an AMA. I think I need to do another Ask Me Anything. It's been a while. I said I was going to do more. I'm a bad radio host. I have not done more because my weeks are pretty full. And by the time I hit Saturday, I'm usually like, I'm so done. I don't know. But I think maybe we should do an Ask Me Anything here in the near future. Is it better to do it in an evening? Maybe I'll ask the chat room the question. Maybe you guys could tell me. If I was going to do an Ask Me Anything, just kind of a sit down where we just crack open a fine glass of whiskey and I did. Dave, I'm sorry, Dave, send me. I already did. Fairbanks went. Dave's listening to me, I think, right now. I did. Okay. Okay. Anyway, I don't know. Would it be better? But, usually I think the last time we did it, it was 2 or 3 hours. We just kind of hung out and you guys asked me questions about, I think it was about a little bit of everything, life, hobbies, history, memories. It was just a hangout, right? So is it better to do on a weekend? Because I think the last time we did it on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, or is it better in the evening, like 5, 6 o'clock in the evening on a weekday? You guys will have to let me know. It's fun to watch you struggle, says Jeannie. She's cackling. I didn't mean cackle as pejorative, but she's she's like, it's fun to watch you struggle. No, it's not. They pulled hundreds of thousands of gallons of free product from the water table. Okay. Anytime after 5 p.m., says Terry. Everybody seems to be saying evening is good. Now, I suppose if I was announcing it and letting people know ahead of time that we could do an Ask Me Anything, I'd love that. I would love to just hang out with folks and do it, and we'll just do it for core members, and we'll post it to the core Facebook page, and we'll just do it there. We'll do a hangout. I think that would be a fun thing. Can't join my drinking show. Well, you don't have to drink. I very rarely ever drink. When I do, it's fine whiskeys. But other than that, that's not what I do. But we hang out and chat, and it's kind of fun. It's kind of an enjoyable thing to get things going on. Weekend? Well, that's the thing. I was asking, should we do it on the weekend or the weekdays? Weekdays would actually be easier for me because I'm still in work mode. By the time I hit the weekend, I'm usually so focused on getting my stuff done that I need to get done around the house or things with the family for the weekend. Or I've already planned some kind of relaxation thing. That was it. Jeannie says, I have to say the last one put a smile on my face for days. And it was the last AMA, and it was Scotch. Yes, it's Scotch whiskey. When I say whiskey, I mean Scotch whiskey. That's the only thing it is. Single malt, preferably. All right. It looks like, I don't know. It looks like there's only been a handful of you who said anything. So maybe the weekday it is. Maybe we'll have to plan on that. We'll pull that together. Okay, we are 15 seconds out right now from rejoining the radio. We'll get things up and running, and we will see what you guys have to say. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Let's do this thing. Okay, we're ready to go here. Apparently, the folks down on the peninsula got a little bit of a behind-the-scenes thing there because some reason the station didn't go to commercial break, but we are back, ready to go. You guys all ready? Shall we dive into the stories and see what see what's going on? Let's continue on with the discussions for today. Where do I want to start? Maybe we should talk about I'm sorry. Dave just texted me from Homer about the station. I don't know what to say to that. Okay. Well, we'll figure it out. Maybe we should talk about politicians going to politicianate. Politicians going to be political. I don't know. So the story is over. Well, the story's in a couple different places, but I'm reading it from KTUU this morning. Lex Yelverton has written up this piece talking about what's going on in Anchorage. And I know some of you are like, Anchorage, why do I care? I'm just using it as an example of how politicians are sometimes looking for a solution for a problem that isn't there. And I think this is it. North Anchorage Assembly member Daniel Voland has put forward a new ordinance that would change the rules for drivers stopped at dozens of downtown intersections in Anchorage. If passed, the new rule would make it illegal for drivers to turn right on a red light at approximately 45 stoplights inside a 6x16 block of the Central Business District between 3rd and 9th Avenue and L and Gamble Streets. Vehicles would only be able to enter the intersection when the light turns green and they have the right-of-way. Now, why does he do this? I mean, has there been a lot of accidents, deaths, pedestrian hit and runs? Has there been a lot of things? Well, no. He cited the dramatic increased number of traffic fatalities that occurred nationwide. And because Anchorage has a significant mix of motorized and pedestrian road users, which name me any downtown corridor in any, semi-major city of a population of over 100,000 that doesn't have a significant mix of motorized and pedestrian users on the road. I mean, name me, but he's citing nationwide fatalities. He's apparently trying to get ahead of the curve here. Then they had testimony. This is quotes from the story here that are testimony from people who are all from outside, apparently, in support of this, or some in some of them who are against it. In this case, a tourist from Georgia says, "As a driver, I like being able to turn on right on red. You've got to watch out for pedestrians, bicyclists, and whatnot." He said it would be pretty inconvenient for drivers to wait to make a right turn, especially in peak traffic time when there's no one in the crosswalk. I mean, if you've ever hit Anchorage between, say, 3:30 p.m. and 5 p.m., 6 p.m., it's a mess. I mean, it is a hot mess sometimes to get out of there. Anchorage resident Ardith Lester also did not see the need for a change, saying she hasn't heard of many stories of pedestrians getting injured at intersections. What's going on? Then they had a tourist from California that came in and said, "Oh, I'm a driver, but as a pedestrian, I've been hit 3 times by cars turning right on red because they were looking, we just need to." Again, this whole thing seems like it's a solution looking for a problem. But this is what Brad was talking about earlier, where we have politicians who are, in many cases, just trying to do something, right? That's something needs to be done about whatever it is, X, Y, or Z. Sometimes maybe it makes sense, but usually it's so reactionary that it really, in a lot of cases, doesn't fix the main problem or just creates more problems than it solves. It's the unintended consequences of the laws that get you going on this. But I just had to chuckle when I saw this, and I was like, really, we're just going to turn, we're just going to turn this all down. This is the idea. The city reported 109 vehicle pedestrian crashes in 2022. About 10 of them happened downtown. So this would not, But 93 vehicle cyclist crashes in 2022, with about 5 of them happening downtown. So what's this? He also says it's not just about safety. He wants to foster more foot traffic downtown. That would be beneficial to the local economy. You want to make it more beneficial? Get the parking fixed downtown. Get the roads plowed out downtown to where we can actually park up near the sidewalk. This is not the solution to this right here. I'm just going to say that this is a solution looking for a problem. But again, it is the typical political response of we must do something for some perceived issue on this. And that just doesn't do me any good. All right, what else we got here? I want to talk about this. This breach that happened, this data breach that probably none of you have heard about. But we'll talk about that here and in just a second. Meanwhile, let's go over to the phones. And we'll get started with your phone calls as well to see what you have to say. 907-433-3150. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Randy in Fairbanks.
Good morning, Randy. What's on your mind, sir?
Hello?
Hello? I can hear you, Randy. What's on your mind?
Hello?
Randy?
You can hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Suddenly I can't hear your voice, but I'll go ahead. Okay. I am concerned about HJR 7, which has been mentioned a few times just lately on the show. That is a bill to try to put a free cash handout, namely the PFD, into the Constitution, and I think that's a terrible mistake. I liken it to a poison apple that's being offered to the Alaskan people. They should not do that. We need to keep our true and honest dividend, which means a payment that is based on surplus money that we have created based on our proper husbandry of our financial situation and budget in the state affairs, and we should not elevate that to a basic human right that people get to have free money no matter what.
Are you asserting that the permanent fund dividend is that's government money? I mean, you don't believe what Jay Hammond talked about with the people's share of the revenue resources or any of that? You don't believe that that's true?
Yeah, it's government money, which is commonly owned by all the people. Everything in the government is commonly owned by the people.
But I mean, Hammond talked specifically about the permanent fund as being the way to pay the people for their loss of their mineral rights, their private property rights, and a way to give them their fair share of the mineral wealth in the state. And so you don't believe in what Hammond's vision was for that?
Well, the mineral wealth that is generated in this state is for the benefit of the people, whether it's put into public services or whether it's put into cash payments based on a surplus beyond what is required for public necessary services. And so, yes, it all goes to the people. But I'm just saying that a free guaranteed cash handout should not be enshrined in the Constitution. That should be left in the legislative arena.
The HJR 7, by the way, would only say that they shall pay a dividend. It doesn't say how much. That would still be factored by statute. So legislators could make it 5%. They could zero it out. They could make it 50-50. But you'd still be against having to say that they shall transfer and make a payment.
Yeah, I would be against them saying so in the Constitution, because other people in the lower 48 will gravitate toward that and point to that and say, look at what Alaska has done in their Constitution. They have said that a free cash handout is a basic right of the human people, and therefore we should do the same thing with a universal basic income here down in the lower 48, and they have experimented in various places in the lower 48 with that, and that's just a terrible idea, because down there, to do that, they have to finance it by taking money from hardworking people.
But you don't see the taking of the permanent fund as taking money from the people. You just assume that it's all governments, and government is going to be wise and diligent, and that they've done a bang-up job so far.
Well, the job they do is dependent on the people themselves, who they elect as their representatives and how closely they pay attention to what's going on. And there, of course, is always going to be waste in government, but we do not have to accelerate our decline by making basically a universal basic income the law of the land, the highest law of the land. That's just a terrible mistake.
So you would think that a one-time payout per year is a form of universal basic income. That's what you're saying.
No, one-time payment. The PFD is fine. I'm all for the PFD. As you know, I support 2 PFDs. I want to also add a PFD that's similar to Hammond's original PFD that he signed into law in 1980. But anyway, that's a different story. But that is great. If we can have a surplus after basic bills are paid to pay out and send out checks to everybody, that's great. I've collected PFD for years.
You're basically advocating for this, and you actually said this on the program about 15 years ago, where you said just give them all the money they want. They'll eventually, and I'm paraphrasing, they'll eventually learn to spend responsibly and spend within their means. You are not for cutting the resource fund to government to try and force them to live within their means. You're like, give them all the money they want, and if they happen to have a surplus, then we can have some of it. But until then, we should give them whatever they want because they know best? ?
Well, I've never really said that. You have taken something that I have said 15 years ago, you say, and you keep falling back on that when we have our talks. And maybe it's something when I said, well, I'm giving back my PFD because, which I have done since 2015, and maybe you've misinterpreted what I meant by that or what my purpose in doing that was. But I'm not for a state income tax, which is like giving them all they want. I'm opposed to a state income tax, and passing H.R. 7, which would enshrine the PFD payment in the Constitution, would hasten the imposition of a state income tax. And as a working man, I'm against that.
State income tax, I think, is inevitable, Randy. I mean, look, not just the projections, even if they left it alone, even if HJR 7 didn't pass, and they, but the PFD is diminishing. I mean, they're going to draw it down. According to, this is not me saying it, this is the numbers that OMB and others have put out, saying that within a few years, that money will all be gone, and then there will be a tax. So do you think that there's any other way to force government to live within its means other than to starve the beast, so to speak?
Well, my idea that I've put forward on the show before is to have an expansion clause built right into the PFD statute, statute that says that if there is a surplus,
but that's not my question.
PFD
That's not, but
shall
that's
be higher than what the base amount is.
But Randy, that's not my question.
And that would encourage people to cut spending.
That's not my question. The question is, what is the best way to get the government to live within its means? Is it to reduce the amount of revenue available for them to spend so that they then have to prioritize what they're doing and look at what they're mandated to do and then go from there? Or is it to give them access to ever increasing amounts of money and then one day they'll figure it out?
Well, the best way is to elect representatives that want a lean government and efficient government, and I try to vote for good people. I'm sure you try to vote for good people. Kevin McCabe is your representative. I think he's a good person, and that's the way we go forward.
All right. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate your call. Appreciate you calling in. Let's go over here. One more call before we go to break. We'll see what you have to say. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Barbara Haney calling from North Pole, Alaska.
Hello, Barbara. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind is Thursday evening at 5:30, there's going to be a special assembly hearing to pass, presumably, an ordinance that would raise the tax cap. One version of the ordinance has the election scheduled for April 30th. Another version of the ordinance is to put it on the October ballot. Both versions call for dedicating funds to education and enable and I don't know. I mean, they want to increase your taxes by $10 million, so folks. So Thursday evening, show up, call the the borough clerk ahead of time, get on the schedule to speak. This is at 5:30, so you want to call her before 4:30, so take your lunch hour, call the borough clerk's office, and get on the schedule, get off work, and head on down there and testify, email, whatever. Hey, if you think this is a good idea, then you should show up and testify too. I don't think most people think this is a good idea. We're talking about probably $100 per 100,000 of taxes. So you look at your assessment bill that you just got, or your assessment statement. You got a $300,000 house. It's an extra $300 this either this January, this June, July, or next year.
Okay.
And this is a big deal. People need to speak up. You can email assembly, ASSEMBLY @fnsp.gov, or that's the email. You can call in, set up a time to testify. You could testify by phone, or you could show up in the assembly. Showing up is a big deal.
Right.
That has an impact. So if you can show up, do it.
All right. We'll hold the line for a second, Barbara. That's coming up again Thursday at 5:30. Get your ducks in a row and go check it out. All right. We are up against the next break. We're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Phone lines are open, 907-433-3150. We continue with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, Barbara, I just want to get your, because I read this the other day that the mayor was now, apparently now they found $13 million in the couch cushions or something. And so now that's not necessarily the crisis it is. And that's how they've now decided to have two options.
Well, there's always a crisis. It's always for the children, right? Well, they took the couch out of, my joke is that they took the couch out of the Mary Sy lobby. And lo and behold, they found $13 million. It's not really what happened, but it's a nice joke. Really what happened is the money was there all along. Most of us from last year's assembly knew that. The auditor, of course, reported it in the audit report. So now the audit committee can claim that they magically found $13 million. The auditor found it, but it was always there. The rest of us knew about it. That's why they kept saying, there's a crisis. I'm like, no, there isn't.
Yeah. Well,
those of us on the finance committee last year knew that money was there.
Well, and then I guess
not like a secret. That's why I've been against this whole thing.
Right. Well, and I guess my question is, why do they still have two options then? Why wouldn't they just put it on the October ballot if they're so hot and fired to do it? Why? Why wouldn't, when the mayor said that, I assumed that they were then going to change it to the October 10th ballot and it would go head to head with the tax cap. But now they're giving you two options? That just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I don't know. The committee substitute, or the substitute by Ms. Fletcher, and she introduced it last week, was to put it on the October ballot because they magically found $10 million in the audit committee. Well, I watched the audit committee. They accepted the report and they sent it on up. It was like a 30-minute meeting at best. The audit committee didn't find anything. The auditor reported on what we already knew was there, and that the mayor was trying to act like it wasn't there.
Right.
So there's a couple other pots of money as well, and it's not for me to get all involved in that piece, but they don't need to raise the tax cap. This is a fabricated crisis. And of course, it's always for the children, right? So you create a crisis, you say it's for the children, but you can't dedicate funds in the state.
Right.
So they can take that tax increase and they can spend it on us.
Yeah.
Whatever.
No, exactly. Well,
whatever.
I hope everybody shows up on Thursday to talk about this because, yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever. Absolutely no sense whatsoever. All right, Barbara. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for the heads up.
Michael, but let me tell you one other thing. this is really a slap in the face of the activists who signed the tax cap.
Oh yeah. No, it's definitely a poke right in the eye to anybody who's ever carried a petition for the tax cap or fought for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Barbara. Well, thank you so much.
Well, you guys have a great day and hope to see you Thursday night.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Barbara Haney, there on us. Let's go back over here. Ryan said, I thought Mayor Wood bailed on the ordinance. Well, so did I. That's what I had read. But apparently they're deciding to keep all their arrows in the same quiver. We might still get it on top of that. We might get an extra $10 million. Once they got the machine running, they, oh, man, it's just. Okay. On Friday, head over to the Republican Women's Fairbanks Lincoln Day dinner. All money goes towards electing local candidates. Well, that's good. Scrolling through here. Mike, I did see your comment. He just posted the link again, where they named Alaska as America's most corrupt state. I'm thinking about talking about that on Thursday, but there you go. Ryan said, I'm pretty sure the mayor pulled it, but I could be wrong. I did receive a letter from an assembly member, which I think they regret after I responded. Well, I'd be interested to see what that was all about. Phil, tell us more. Tell us more. Shelley says, okay, I'll be in the assembly chambers on Thursday to say hell no. Well, there you go. That's good stuff. Jeannie also said to Randy's comment, your characterization of the PFD is demeaning. I mean, I agree with that, but you can't even have a rational argument when you can't agree on the fundamental basics of the facts. That's you just can't even have an argument about it. So there you go. I'm scrolling through here. Okay. All right. We're ready to go. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. What do I want to talk about? Do I want to talk about the breach? Do I want to talk about Biden? Or do I want to talk about Sarah Vance's comments? You guys tell me in the chat room right now. 1, 2, or 3. 1, 2, or 3. Hit me with it. Breach, Biden, Vance. 1, 2, or 3. Just type it in the chat room. Here we go. It's the last time I ever give the chat room the opportunity to weigh in on something. I said, what should we do for the last segment? 1, 2, or 3? Give them 3 different choices, and then somebody says 4. Chemtrails. Let's talk about chemtrails. All right. Welcome back to the program. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Wow. Everybody's all over the place. But it seems like the chat room has spoken and they want me to talk a little bit about Sarah Vance. So to me personally, this is much ado about nothing. Okay. You probably won't find a person in the legislature who is more strident and more vocal and has done more about human trafficking, sexual assault, violence, those things than Sarah Vance. She's been championing this for years. Well, apparently she was in the House Tribal Affairs Committee hearing last Wednesday, and she made a comment about the disproportionate rates of domestic violence and sexual violence experienced by Alaska Native women. And maybe she didn't say it the best way, but I didn't watch the whole committee, but I did hear the comment that, that's got everybody spun up. And the ADN actually, Sean McGuire with the ADN actually has a story up on this. And here's what she said that apparently blew a lot of people's minds. She goes, what I hear in this committee is that Alaska Native women feel that it's exclusive to your experience because it sounds exactly what I've heard of white women in my community. It's the same thing. But what I continue to hear in this committee over and over again, as if you're the only one, and I know that's not your heart. Basically saying, we know it's worse statistically for Native women, but every person who's experienced this has a very similar experience, and we need to basically take care of everybody. Well, that immediately led to fervor. C.J. McCormick, who's a Democrat from Bethel and a member of the Majority Caucus, said he was at a loss for words. He said he and Vance spoke and that he better understood where she was coming from. But it was hard to hear those comments after the committee had heard more than an hour of powerful testimony about the public safety crisis facing Alaska Natives. Vance, who obviously has championed who's been the champion among lawmakers trying to address human and sex trafficking, noted in her comments the incredible gap between Alaska Native women's experience in accessing resources for justice. But she also encouraged Indigenous advocates to remember that they have white sisters who are going through the same thing. So again, it was just, we know it's a problem, but everybody lost their mind. Ashley Carrick, the Fairbanks Democrat, said that as a white woman, it hurt her to hear about disparities facing Alaska Native women. But then that everything that the justice for victims was not the same, and that that Vance shouldn't have made those comments. So 5 days after the committee hearing, Sarah Cloud onto the floor yesterday and apologized for comments that she said were, quote, less than gracious, adding, what I should have said is that evil does not discriminate. When we talk about sexual violence and justice, it's messy and dirty, and my words created offense. It's not my heart or my intention to ever create an offense, especially on such a deeply important topic. I in no way want to dishonor the voice of victims of sexual violence or Alaska Native voice who've been crying out for justice for so long. But here's where it gets just icky. At the same time, she was apologizing on the House floor. The House Minority Caucus issued a prepared statement to the media demanding that she apologize for the comments that they said were appalling. The whole thing is appalling. All sexual assault and violence is appalling. But because she dared to say we need to take care of everybody collectively, that was appalling. Fairbanks Democrat Maxine Dibert, the only Alaska Native woman currently serving in the legislature, said in the interview earlier that day that she's been very hurt by Vance's comments, that she appreciated Vance's apology, but she wished it had been made in private to her first. Just, it's a horrific topic. It's a horrible topic. I in no way saw that as demeaning. It's probably because of my white privilege that I didn't see it as demeaning, as I saw it as a way to remind us all that we are all in the same boat together and we need to address this for everyone, especially for the disproportionately affected Native women, but that it's for everyone as well. And the fact that Dibert got her feelings hurt by words, I understand it happens sometimes, but that she wanted Vance to come make a private apology to her first. And because she didn't, they went out and put a press release out and made it a political football. That's just dumb. That's just dumb. Dibert said that the violence against anyone is horrible. Oh, well, I'm glad you acknowledged that. But disproportionate rates of violence experienced by Alaska Native makes the situation unique. I would agree with that. I would agree that it makes the situation unique, but it doesn't diminish the suffering of anyone else as well. I think I think she's right. Evil does not discriminate was what she was trying to say. That everyone's got skin in this game, and we need to fight it. But the fact that they turned it into a political football to try and smear or demean somebody who's probably got one of the purest hearts in the legislature, Sarah Vance is just, I mean, she's She's just such a sweet lady. And she's been fighting this battle for 5 years. And the fact that they go after this whole thing with like a timed press release that just as she's making the comments on the floor to apologize, they're demanding it's something different. It's freaking stupid. So there you go. You wanted my thoughts on it? That's what I'm just like. Everybody is so butthurt about everything. And again, you can play the butthurt because now it's a political thing. Oh, her apology was fine, but I just wish she'd come and made it to my face earlier. Well, does that mean she has to go to each and every individual Alaska Native that was offended and apologize to them first before she apologizes to the group as a whole? It just makes no sense. All right, we got time for one call here before we go. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Carlene in Kodiak.
Good morning, Carlene.
As a elderly Alaska Native woman, I appreciate what Sarah Vance has been doing for us. I want to say thank you. And I really believe that her intentions are good, and I appreciate her speaking the truth. In love, it has to be spoken. That's what tough love is.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Carlene. I appreciate it. And you know what? I mean, there you go. There's one person who wasn't necessarily hurt by her words. So I guess it's not universal. That's the other thing. They act like it's all universal. Like if they're offended, then everybody who's in their camp or their gender or their skin tone or everybody must be offended if that's the case. But I don't think it necessarily was. I know Sarah Vance. She does not say things for bombast. She does not say things for shock value. She does not say things to hurt people. And the fact that they did this, and as she's making the heartfelt apology on the floor, they put this out and make it even more political is just disgusting. It's just disgusting. Just divide us more. Okay. Just divide us more. That's all we need to do. Inclusivity equals outrage, said Brian. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what it is. Somebody's got to be offended. Somebody's got to be offended. And if you keep looking for something to be offended about, you will find it. Even the most well-meaning words, I'm sure, could offend somebody. But, there you go. I don't see anybody coming after Jennifer Johnston to demand her apology when she was in the legislature and said that all the people, the natives, just drink up their PFDs. I didn't see anybody. I didn't see the outrage then for one of the dumbest comments I've ever heard. But there you go. That's how it works around here, apparently. All right, we got to go. We will continue. Yeah. Sarah was just saying, don't forget anyone. If you're offended, then you've got the problem. Exactly. All right, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Be kind, love one another, live well. Credit where credit's due. That was a good comment, Harold. It's a good comment. Sarah was just saying, don't forget anyone. If you're offended, then you've got the problem. But if you're looking to be offended, you will find it anywhere you look. You'll find it. You will find it. Rick says, man, I got stuff I want to say, but it would get me kicked off of everything. It's just so irritating. All right. Well, my friends, that does it for today. Maybe I'll put a poll up in the Common Sense Corps to figure out when people want to do an AMA. Maybe I'll do that. But you won't be able to vote on it unless you're a member of the Common Sense Corps. If you want to participate, it's only $3 a month. It helps out the show. Puts whiskey in my glass, shoes on my kids' feet, gas in my car, new equipment for the studio. That's how we do all these things. So if you want to help, go to patreon.com/Michael Duke Show. All right, friends, we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
fun.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.